Welcome to Business Makers. I'm Matthew Weimer, and today we have Jonathan Pollinger. Do you like to go by John or Jonathan?
Good question. So either Jonathan or people tend to call me JP, so which are my initials. So
Okay.
yeah, Jonathan or JP.
All right. Uh, JP, I'll go with JP,
Thank
is
you.
a social media trainer providing straightforward, practical training for small businesses and charities since 2009. Before social media was a thing, a business for media. Let me try that again. Before social media for business was a thing. He's interested in bringing people together using technology just as social media does today. Over the past 14 years, John has worked with small businesses, PR, social media agencies, charities, and MP. I was meaning to ask, what is an MP?
So member of parliament. So it's
Okay.
a elected person in the government, basically. So
Okay.
UK is split into constituencies, and then which is an area, and then every area votes for an MP. So quick story around that. So basically, this
Yeah.
guy wasn't on Twitter back in the day. He was the outsider to win, and he just totally embraced Twitter. After I trained him up on Twitter, he's inviting people around to his house and meeting people all over the place and answering their questions, and it gave him
Wow.
the edge. I'm not taking credit for his victory, but he
Yeah.
did actually win against the odds, so which was good to see. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Um, he's an avid runner, horse racing enthusiast, and he lives in lovely Cardiff, Wales. I've my wife and I are Anglophiles, and so we watch a lot of British TV. So we've
Yep.
seen Cardiff from afar, and
Okay.
uh,
Yeah.
and I'm gonna miss. I'm sad. I saw your post the other day that you were going to be taking a break from Threads, but I totally understand why you're doing it because the same thing happens to me and it drives me nuts. But
Yeah.
yeah. Welcome to the show, John. I'm
Thank
glad
you.
to have you
Great to be here.
on. It's been a long time coming. You've kind of been on my bucket list to get on the show. Um, so um Chris, so I'll start off. How? Uh, Let me see. Uh, I am going to start. I got a little jumbled up here with my questions.
No problem. Shoot in anywhere you like.
Yeah. Well, let's start here. Is Can you tell us kind of what were like, um, what how was the progression of your career over
Mhm.
the last 14 years?
Okay. So I started off, I was basically working in a large company managing an intranet and doing internal com stuff. And that's how my sort of technology, but people thing kicked off, I guess. So, like, I introduced a messaging system for the business. This is like before messaging systems were a thing. So, we're talking like 20 years ago, really. So
Wow.
everyone like had this little desktop thing that would like pop up and they could like talk to each other. So stuff like that. And then I created a bit of a forum for solving problems, trying to make the intranet work more than just a sort of notice board, which most intranets were at the time. Trying to bring a bit of interactivity and community stuff to it, kind of like almost social media stuff, but
Yeah.
pre-social media or in parallel with social media coming out. So always interested in technology and bringing people together. Then I saw a few talks around Cheltenham where I was living at the time where people were talking about tech and social media. And it was just not being too rude to them, but I just thought, do you know what? Actually, I can do better than this. So I did. So I basically started off talking when I was still working. And then that coincided with me being made redundant. So it's like, well, what do I do now? So I thought, well, I just carry on this talking thing. And then
Yeah.
one day I got a break because I gave a talk at a network meeting. It was about Facebook, and some business people came up to me afterwards. So I was kind of, I thought, what's going on here? Because it's like group of people, literally about 5 people were like marching towards me. And I thought, oh my God, are they going to complain about the talk or something? And they actually, I remember the words quite well. The person sort of leading the little group said, well, we've had a chat, and if we paid you some money, those magic words, would you like come and run a workshop for us and tell us more about the subject of your talk? And that was it. So I got paid for that one, and they gave me a whole bunch of referrals to people around town. And pretty soon, I was like running regular workshops, literally in the back of a UK term, but in the back of a pub, back of a bar. So that had some space there, and yeah, people would turn up, and I was like running these things like once every week, once every 2 weeks, and that's how I got going. And then since then, yeah, lots of changes, obviously with social media itself, but fundamentally the training's pretty much stayed the same, apart from the obvious sort of like shift to the virtual side of things. Um, and I do still prefer the face to face. I make use of all the tech with Zoom and Teams and everything, and it's important, and it helps to see people when perhaps you couldn't see them normally because of geographical restrictions or time restrictions, kind of
Hmm.
like we're doing now, really. But I still, there's just something about that in person thing where you can have that slightly more in depth conversation, get a bit more feedback from people in terms of how your training is going, get them
Hmm.
involved a bit, get them doing a little bit more. So, yeah, and I do a bit of management on the side with a little agency, sort of creating content and running ads, and then which I'm sure we'll talk about, getting more into the AI side of things as well now.
Hmm. Yeah, there's a few things that strike me out about what you just said, because you've always seemed to be very community oriented. I noticed. I think, like, digging back, I found like you at one point were doing something involved with the horse racing, um,
Yeah,
and
I was spotted.
yeah, and
Yeah,
then I
yeah,
know,
no, I had,
yeah.
yeah,
Go
I
ahead.
had a sort of community there, a website, sort of members, fans, people involved, chatting to each other. Not I just got other priorities now, so I sort of dropped that several years ago. So it's interesting that you found that. But we were actually one of the first people to use YouTube to like give previews, sort of like panel previews of get experts in, and previews of the big races and horse racing festivals and stuff. And interestingly, now the main sort of sports TV channels do exactly the same thing. So we were
Yeah.
kind of like ahead of our time on that one. But yeah, there's that, and then I've got a running community going now. I've got a co-working community as well that meets every Friday. That happens sort of 4 places across the country actually, so that's expanded quite nicely, that one.
Mhm.
But not a business thing. It's just purely a community thing. So no sort of money involved, just like a free event, and the people that run that are just doing that voluntarily. So, but it's all good stuff. It's like bringing people together, and yeah, I wouldn't say, I definitely don't sort of just do it for work, but I have got work out of it, and lots of people have got lots of work out of it, which is great, just by making sort of casual, informal relationships. It's back to that thing about the in person thing. I think you can get to know somebody, get to sort of really understand what they do, trust them, and then you may well do business with them. So it's all about that, really.
Yeah. Um, Chris Anderson has he's the creator of TED Talks. He said this in a
Yeah.
recent book, Infectious Generosity, which I'm going through right now. He said the internet can turbocharge generosity, and generosity can transform the internet. How have you dispelled the paranoia behind AI, and what are some ways that for us to automate generosity?
Yeah, that's a huge question. Almost two questions there. So first one, I think you're right. There are quite a lot of sort of quite a bit anti AI at the moment, if you like. It has got a bit of
Mm-hmm.
a backlash. both in terms of people's worries and fears, in a number of ways. So I guess the sort of like ultimate sort of Terminator stuff, but then perhaps more realistically, people worried about losing their jobs and that sort of side of it. So I think the main thing to do is just to sort of explain to people that it's a tool, the same as anything else is a tool. So probably maybe a good way is to pick sort of, like for example, Microsoft are doing Copilot now. So we've always had things like Word and PowerPoint to make our roles more easy, more make ourselves more productive. And all really Copilot is an add-on to that, to sort of like turbo boost those tools that we've already got. So I can't see. I can see it maybe replacing some jobs, but actually those jobs people don't really want anyway. To be honest, they're not going to be happy in those sort of jobs. So, very much sort of like data processing, repetitive, boring, task-based analysis, that kind of like stuff AI is good at and can do. So I think see it as a tool. The the generosity side, I'm not so sure about that. I think what he's getting at, maybe the first part of that quote there about the internet. Was it the internet's turbocharging generosity? Was that the starting
Yeah,
point of the quote?
the internet can turbocharge generosity, and the generosity can
Yeah,
transform the internet. Yeah.
yeah. So I think what he's probably getting at there is sort of how technology can bring people together, can improve fundraising, can get people sort of like cause across in terms of um, charities and causes that are looking to raise money. Um, I think, I mean, there is a certain amount of, and this is sort of difficult bit, there is a certain amount of, I think the internet can sort of suck the emotions out of things sometimes. I mean, it's certainly very good for raising awareness. And it's back to my point about the in person stuff. I think that's where you can generate that emotional connection. But for sure, it can turbocharge in the sense that it can save time, bring people together, and also really importantly, which is what a lot of social media is about, is actually make those initial contacts so that people can then get to know each other and meet face to face. So yeah, which is kind of like why I'm here. I know we're not actually meeting in person as
Yeah.
such, but as a kind of like half an example, isn't it, of us knowing each other through threads and then meeting here. So I think it can do that. Think other things with regard to AI. I mean, because of the sort of things I spoke about, really, because it can speed up tasks and processes. I think a lot of behind the scenes stuff it can help with, but I don't think. I think generosity is it's a human kind of thing, and I don't think you can ever really replicate that. And that's sort of coming from somebody that generally believes AI is more human than a lot of people think. So if I could explain that a little bit, I think a lot of people just sort of make it sort of like black and white and say, well, humans can be creative and AI can't. It kind of like lacks that creativity, sort of unique creativity, perhaps, that an artist could bring to the table. But I actually disagree with that. I think if
Hmm.
you provide enough context and background for AI, then I don't see why it can't be creative, if not more creative than a human, quite frankly, because it's got the ability to have more input than any human brain has. So why not? I think it's people are basing that view that it can't be as creative as humans on possibly the fact that AI isn't as powerful as it's going to be, and secondly, they're not really prompting it in the right way. It's like create a Facebook post to sell my T-shirts. Full
Hmm.
stop. That's not you're not going to get a very creative, good social media post with a prompt like that. So, given the right input, I think it could be quite really really quite creative, but generous. That's something else. I don't think it can really directly foster that. Only behind the scenes, I think, with processes and tasks.
Yeah. And would you even say that those skills to be able to prompt in a more effective way are going to become like highly sought after, like kind of skills or kind of tools in the tool chest?
There's a lot of articles around that are saying that, and sort of seemingly, people earning vast amounts of money for doing that. But at the same time, you can download 500 prompts for $20 or something. So there seems to be a
Sure.
bit of a disconnect there. Um, so I would say, yeah, obviously, like in any sphere, there's going to be experts at the very top end, and perhaps in sort of some niche areas that are going to be paid a lot of money for that. But I think perhaps more important is for majority, well, all of us really, yeah, all of us to have a better knowledge of prompting than we currently do, so that we get the most out of it. I think that's where the real battleground is. And I think it's not so much you're going to lose your job to AI. It's going to lose your job if you can't use AI. That's
Yeah.
that's what it's going to come down to. And even perhaps beyond that, you're going to lose your job unless you can use AI well, and you're probably even going to have to demonstrate that to a point in interviews fairly soon, if not already. So,
Hmm.
yeah,
Who are the people that you think are the companies that you think are leading the way right now in AI?
that's that's a difficult one. All the big ones have got sort of stakes in it, and are playing around, and a lot of them are using the OpenAI technology. So I think you have to put OpenAI at the center of things, because they've got their Chat GPT, and they're also doing Copilot as well. And there's quite a few smaller providers out there that are doing. Came across one yesterday actually that was summarizing videos, and that was
Mm-hmm.
using OpenAI technology. So there are a lot that are sort of like accessing their tech. So I think they're very much at the forefront. But Google are having a go, Meta are having a go, although there's not that much out there publicly. I don't know. I don't think Apple are doing very much, are they? As far not that I'm aware,
I haven't
they
heard
must.
much. I'm kind of surprised.
No,
I feel like with everything they've been doing with the Vision Pro, like you would think that it would happen by now.
yeah. I've not
Yeah.
heard much on that. I assume that they might be doing something in the background, and then they're going to sort of like launch something out of nowhere, maybe.
Yeah. Yeah.
um, but yeah, it is. It is. I think it's difficult making comparisons. I think they're all sort of got their strengths and weaknesses, and it also seems to vary over time as well. I've like flirted a little bit with Bard, that's now Google Gemini, and that seems to have improved pretty dramatically.
Hmm.
I simply haven't got time to use them all with everything else that's going on. So, because it's not really my full time role to do that. But um, I would say if you did a like for like comparison now between sort of Google Gemini and ChatGPT, it would be a lot closer than it was like even 6 months ago with ChatGPT versus Bard, where ChatGPT would have won hands down, I think, for most sort of tasks. So yeah, so things are shifting and changing all the time, but yeah, you've got to say that OpenAI for the tech, but then of course, if you're looking at rollout and marketing, there's massive stuff going on with Microsoft right now, with Copilot, some really big moves in terms of integrating it with literally everything, every single
Hmm.
app and bit of software that they do. And I think rolling it out with 365 initially, um, is a sense very clever move, because it's the 365 PowerPoint, Excel, and Word that most of us are using. So that's quite clever to make it almost like mainstream initially, and then roll it out for other kind of like roles, as they're going along. So yeah. For the back, yeah, that's a good way of putting it, isn't it? For the back end, I think we go with OpenAI, and for the front end, we go with Microsoft.
Yeah. I started using uh Google just rolled out like a um L notebooks LM or something like that, and it
Okay, not
helps
seen
you
that.
capture ideas and resources. Um,
Yep.
Kind of if you're familiar with Tiago Forte's para method, uh, it's kind of like getting things done. David Allen,
Okay.
kind of in that ballpark, but it's insane how it helps you gather all these like articles and things that you know
That's good.
you've gathered, and then you can tell it make a summary of that. And what
Yeah,
are some of the tools that you've been using? You mentioned Copilot.
yeah.
What are some of the things that you're like teaching on as of late?
Yeah, so interesting you mentioned summaries there. I think summaries is a really sort of like powerful tool. Possibly even the summary part of AI, I think, is even more useful than the curation part, because we're just always having to deal with most of us in our roles having to deal with huge amounts of information and data in some cases coming down. And even the fact that you can summarize, which I was literally just doing before coming on this call, you can just like click a summarize button now in Outlook and get through your emails a lot quicker that way than having to read through them. And in the same kind of like format, which seems to be, for me at least, it's easier on the brain,
Mm-hmm.
because you haven't got to sort of suddenly switch between two different styles and different formats when you're sort of like looking for the key points in emails. So that's like huge. But that's like one example. I mean, there's so many things to summarize, aren't there? You can just point it at anything. You can point it at a website. You can point it at a series of emails, um, huge amounts of documentation, and then sort of what I would call summaries with a twist are really useful. So, like maybe I was working with some IT companies recently. So, if you've got like a whole bunch of, say, helpful IT kind of how-to type stuff and problem-solving stuff, you can essentially turn that into an FAQ, which is pretty handy for clients. So, summarizing is a huge thing. Creation, I mean, I think most of the kind of like mentioning summarizing because I believe it is the most useful thing, but that there's just creation seems to be the thing that everyone talks about. Um, and yes, it is valuable there with the right context and right sort of information. But I think in terms of actual saving time, I think it's other things like summaries. Another one would be comparisons as well. So like sort of comparing documents, and again, kind of like summaries with a twist. Converting documents is quite an interesting one. I don't know if you played around with like converting Word to PowerPoint and that sort of stuff. That's quite interesting. So that can give you a good sort of starting point for some slides to get you going. So that's good. Other uses I find sort of like both personally and teaching people are the sort of what I would call higher end and lower end. So to sort of explain that, so big picture sort of stuff. So anything planning and strategic, I think it's pretty strong on that. So if we're talking like social media, that might be a content plan, but it could be anything: business plan, marketing plan, anything sort of like looking ahead. And again, with specific parameters, that kind of thing can be pretty daunting if you're writing it as a person. Your boss
Mm-hmm.
gives you a task of writing a marketing plan for the next 12 months. It's like, oh, it's like such a big task. You've got to either sort of like chunk it up or allocate yourself 3 or 4 days to like do it.
Yeah.
But you can fling that into Copilot or Chat GPT and you'll get an answer within about 90 seconds. That is a really good starting point. So that kind of thing I think is powerful. And then the lower end stuff, I tend not to use it for creating social media stuff, but I do for bits of it. So if I need like a good headline for a social post or subject line for an email,
Mm-hmm.
or hashtags is probably an underutilized one. Nice and simple, and there are lots of tools out there for generating hashtags, or people just like put in their own. But why not use AI, because it can pick some whatever you want, topical ones, brand hashtags, whatever you like. So that's quite handy. So I think, yeah, I mean that's a few sort of examples of its capabilities. I think the next stage, which is probably two things that are coming up, are kind of getting it to a bit more like, and there is a little bit of this with Microsoft, with like the power apps and that sort of stuff, but more sort of like trigger orientated stuff. So when something
Mm-hmm.
happens,
Yeah.
you know, send this email or perform this action and that kind of thing. But that's not really in the day to day AI yet, but that would be pretty useful. Another one would be, again, sort of working with different documents simultaneously. If you can like imagine maybe a whole bunch of I'd say like you've got a spreadsheet with products and or services and prices on it, and then you need to sort of send that to a whole bunch of customers, but like with personalized emails. So like your email, in other words, is like drawing the data from
Hmm.
the Excel. You probably can do that at the moment, but it's a little bit messy. So I think sort of that kind of thing is probably to come, and then it's going to be really useful because that kind of thing again manually to sort of like keep your eyes on the spreadsheet, craft up your emails, copy and paste the data. It's like very, very time consuming. But if
Hmm.
you can sort of template things up and then get that template to draw in data from Excel, from Word, from anywhere else, that could be good. Just a final thing, almost like a tip, sort of passing on to anyone that's listening and people that I train is a lot of people kind of ignore PDFs. I've come across several people that go, "Oh, I didn't realize you could do stuff with PDF." But pretty much, Copilot. I don't think I found anything actually that you can't do with PDFs that you can do from Word. Because you tend to think of a PDF as being sort of like locked down and you can't extract the
Yeah.
information. But sure, you can pick up two PDF files and compare them. You can extract data, all that sort of stuff. So yeah, don't ignore analyzing and working with PDFs with AI because it'll work. Give it a try.
Wow. I never thought of that, but yeah. Probably, yeah, because it can read. Nothing's stopping it from reading,
Yeah.
and yeah. Um, but last question on the AI side before we switch over to social media is like, well, to what you were talking about. I use Zapier, and
Yes.
yeah, to like trigger things, and I while I have you here, I have a quandary that I'm trying to figure out. So like for instance, booking these interviews,
Hmm.
I when you go onto Calendly and send a point and you book a time for yourself, would there be a way to then um, set Riverside to create a studio and then send an email? Do you think are we there yet?
Again, I don't think it's quite there yet. You're probably more likely to be able to do that with Zapier, or if you were talking about Microsoft stuff that did all those things,
Hmm.
then possibly you could automate it within the Microsoft system. Um, but yeah, but we're not quite there yet, I don't think. So it's probably kind of possible. By the time you figured it out, you might as well sort of like, yeah, probably stick with. I mean, I think the leap is, you could manually sort of do it with Zapier or just do it manually. But I think the difference is going to be, it's just going to be kind of like, because with Zapier, it takes you time to, log into everything and, decide what's going to connect with what and exactly the triggers and all that sort of stuff. But I think what you want is you just want to describe what you're trying to do, and then it just kind of like basically builds it for you to do it. That's what you want, and you can do that within the Power Apps thing in using Copilot. But I played around with that a little bit, and it's a bit, like I say, it's still not quite there. And Power Apps isn't really a mainstream thing yet. But if you could just go to if you could go to Chat GPT and exactly as you described your potential, requirement there, and then it came back and said, right, and literally built it for you.
Hmm.
That's what you want, isn't it? But it's
Yeah.
we're a little way off that. I mean, it might be able to describe how you could do it, but you still have to go off and manually do it all, wouldn't you?
Yeah.
So one day, probably not too far off, it'd be really nice if you could just literally describe that exactly that kind of scenario that you mentioned, and it just goes off and does it.
Yeah. So you have a newsletter on LinkedIn, I believe, the Social Daily or the Daily Social.
I've actually, yeah, just recently moved on to kind of like rebranded it to Social Mind just because I've included AI stuff there with
Okay.
and social media. So I've just kind of like embraced the two. And Daily was coming a bit. bit too much, to be honest. So I've got quite extreme, but I've dropped it to monthly now from daily. So yeah,
Nice. Yeah,
but
because
try.
you had quite a bit of content in there. I was
Yeah,
looking at the most one of the more recent ones, and I was I was joking to my wife because I thought that like one section was like I was reading it wrong, but I was thinking one section was the whole like the post for the day, and then I realized that no, like there's all these sections. So kudos to you. Um, I saw one of your recent updates was that TikTok is going to 15-minute videos. How do you think that's going to
yeah.
help?
Yeah, I think it might even be going. I think they're even experimenting with up to an hour now.
Wow.
That's sort of like even newer news. I think a lot of these things are just that experiments. It might take a while to change that, but for me, I think the whole culture, and for others, the whole culture of TikTok is the short sort of nature of it. It's a bit like the. I don't know if you spotted they're also trying with horizontal videos,
Mm, yeah.
which again is kind of like against, it's sort of like anti TikTok ethos. So certainly its original kind of like ethos anyway. So again, I don't think that'll work. So I don't think, yeah, obviously a few people will play around with it, both horizontal and longer videos, but I think we can put that in the same bucket, if you like, and say it's not TikTok. I might be wrong, but I just think there's other, if you want an hour long instruction on how to fix your TV or washing machine or something, I don't think it's going to take a big change for people to go to TikTok for that rather than go
Yeah.
to YouTube. So just I can't see it, to be honest. Sure, there's plenty of how to and cool how to videos on TikTok, but the whole point is that they're short, snappy, and generally sort of like fun in nature. And you've kind of, I think most people have got it in their head that if it's a quick fix, it might be on TikTok, but not if it's something that is going to require 45 minutes instructions. Um, so I guess it's nice that they're doing the options, but social networks like to play around and like to change and see what works. But honestly, it wouldn't surprise me if neither horizontal videos and that time thing that might be rolled back, so that we're sort of like back to how it was in a few months. I can't really see it. There you go. There's a prediction. I can't really see it lasting.
Yeah. Do you think that there's a sweet spot on that duration of video as far as content?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. Actually, that's an interesting question. Yeah, I still think I just like go for the short. I just think the whole mechanism of scrolling, and I know this gets a lot of sort of criticism because people get sort of like stuck in the feed and the time disappears and all that sort of thing. But that's because from TikTok's point of view, it's because it's working, because it is engaging your brain to a certain extent, because otherwise you'd be off doing something else. And it's because of those short hits. So I'd go quite short. I think if obviously it depends on what you're actually trying to do with the video, but generally speaking, I'd probably go for about the 30 seconds mark, to be honest, not really any longer than that.
Yeah.
um, to try and directly answer your question with
Yeah.
regard to sweet spot, yeah, 30 seconds.
Um, are there any other recent updates that kind of have like piqued your interest that you're really excited to see where it might go?
I Yeah, there's been a lot of, I think the thing is, at the moment there's a lot of kind of what I would call small changes and tinkering. There isn't really anything sort of like groundbreaking that's happened recently.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and in some cases, if you look at Instagram now, there's just kind of like so many different ways you can put out an update. I think it's about 6 different ways now. I mean, let's just go through. You got like posts, stories, reels. You've got those notes now. You've got broadcast channels. That's 5. So 5 different ways to update in a single social network. That's a lot of work, and that's
Mm-hmm.
almost making it too, well, let's go for 6 because you've got like DMs as well after
Yeah.
all. So, you know, I think that's too much. That's like over egging the pudding. I think
Yeah.
they're trying to sort of, yeah, it's just overcomplicating it, I think. And because somebody that can remember Instagram before it was taken over by Meta, that is just like a world away from its original premise of just uploading cool photographs. Um, End of. So it's changed massively over that time. I'm not saying it should go back to that, but I think it's kind of perhaps lost its heart a little bit there. Facebook hasn't done anything interesting in ages in terms of features for the business page. They've made quite a lot of improvements on the advertising side. I guess that'd be a big shift, bringing the AI into the ads. That's been quite successful with the
Mm-hmm.
Advantage sort of plus stuff. Um, X, I don't really advise clients to go near X at the moment. There's just like too much issues and problems with it. Um, LinkedIn, LinkedIn, LinkedIn love to take away features, but unfortunately, they usually take away decent features. That's the problem
Yeah.
with LinkedIn. I don't know It's always been the same, even before Microsoft owned it. It seems to have the same strange mindset. Maybe it's got the same sort of like management team on there, and it also seems very disjointed on LinkedIn. It seems like, again, a bit like Instagram, they got almost too much going on, but it's almost like the bits don't even talk to, or they literally don't talk to each other.
Mm-hmm.
You can just imagine them. I bet the work culture for LinkedIn is siloed, because you can just imagine them sort of like being giving a discrete project and saying, right, go off and design newsletters, and then they don't like tell the people that it might be a good idea that you can feature your company newsletter on a profile, which of course you'd want to do, but you can't actually do that. It's like, they're not really talking to each other. So yeah. So to actually come back to answering your question, any sort of like major features? No, there isn't. I mean, why doesn't LinkedIn do something like turn itself into a sort of like global intranet? Why can't I fire up a Word document in LinkedIn? Why can't I fire up Copilot in LinkedIn?
Mm-hmm.
Why don't they do something like that? There's nothing sort of clever like that. Yeah, it just needs something a little bit more, I think. So yeah, I think we're in a pretty. Others might disagree with me, but I think we're in a pretty sort of dull kind of time at the moment with regard to new features on social networks. To be honest.
Yeah. Now that we've roasted LinkedIn, the funny thing, uh, I I am always hearing that LinkedIn is kind of an underrated
Yeah.
platform, and because I honestly, for the longest time as a content creator, I didn't feel very at home there.
Mhm.
And so what, for somebody starting out, what would your advice be to how to get the most out of the platform?
Yeah, that's a good question. Simple answer: get active. Just get posting, get connecting. Just do everything that you can on LinkedIn, and then that'll increase your visibility. And so, whatever you're trying to do, get a new job, improve your career, make more sales, get some funds, uh, start your startup, anything like that. LinkedIn can really help, but you've got to get noticed. I think the what you want to try and achieve with LinkedIn is do the opposite of what everyone hates. Everyone hates the sort of like instant sales message as soon as you connect with somebody. So what you want to try and do is get yourself into a position where you've got people coming to you. So you've got the inquiries coming in, you've got inbound stuff going on, but you're not going to get that unless you get active, which means quite a bit of work in, like I say, all those areas really. Mainly posting and connecting, and meanwhile you've got to always keep your profile up to date and all that sort of stuff. So I think if you do that though, you're yes, there's a lot of content on LinkedIn, but anecdotally, sometimes people give me lists that I go through, and people that you'd expect to be on LinkedIn, they're probably on there, but they literally haven't updated their profile in 3 years. There's a lot of people that fall into that category, a lot. Or even worse, people that have never posted. And it literally says that. I mean, that just looked to me, the same people will spend $5,000, pounds on their website, and
Hmm.
yet somebody, because they want to look good, they want their business to look good, but then somebody will look at their crappy LinkedIn profile, which they can find on Google, the same
Hmm.
as their website, and it'll show that they've never made a post. I mean, that's a bit of a disconnect in my mind. So I think if you're going to be on LinkedIn, well, you have to be on LinkedIn, really. And if you're going to be there, you've got to have a bang up to date profile, fully optimized. You've got to be posting, and you've got to be building that network, because that's where your value is, both for the short and the long term. So all of that takes work. But if you can do all that without sending too many sales messages, then people will get in touch with you and offer you work. It's as simple as that, or offer you funds for your business or your charity, or collaboration or something. That
Hmm.
will happen, because people do use the search to seek out partners and to seek out suppliers and to seek out employees. So it can be a powerful platform, but yeah, get busy is the answer to your question. That's the bit of advice. Get busy, get active.
Yeah. Uh, if Threads fixed the things that they need to fix, um, what
Yeah.
um, what what would you like to see on Threads, like as far as going forward?
Yeah. So I quite actually like the simplicity of it. I think when it was working well, that sort of conversational side, sort of almost going back to sort of 2010 Twitter, that is good. That sort of like old school social media, building relationships, getting to know people, that sort of thing. I think that's quite difficult to do, but perhaps they need to, whether it's, which I think is in the works, but maybe they're going to use part of Instagram's messaging to do that. But if they can bring messaging in, I think that's probably the big one. A lot
Yeah.
of people would say I'm contradicting myself there, sort of saying I want it to be simple, but then want to bring in a huge feature like messaging. But I think that would help the conversational side, because that is around conversation. That is about developing relationships with people. I see Threads more as, everywhere else you can, just as we were saying, there's like 6 different ways you can post out content on Instagram. Threads, there is just the one, and it's either just like photos or text. So we don't want to go beyond that. I don't think that should be the focus.
Yeah.
Um, there are, it's just, you just want enough there to get to know people and get that, which helps with the character limit. Just get that sort of, and the name Threads, that implies conversation, doesn't it? That implies somebody sticks up a post, and then there's a sort of conversation that develops underneath it. That anything that sort of enhances that's what I would like to see. And you can tweak the algorithm to help with all of that. So yeah, I'd say biggest thing I'd like to see is messaging, and whatever you can do to enhance the conversation.
Yeah, messages would be huge. I feel like part of the issue is I think if you had to give Threads a subtitle, it's people that don't want to be on Instagram as much. Like it tends to be like people that want to have more conversations, connection, like you said, and uh,
Exactly.
and I feel like the DMs is that thing that is still kind of having us go over to Instagram to like do that connection
Yeah.
there. And yeah,
Agreed.
100%.
Yeah.
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 I noticed on your most current video content on YouTube is through NILC. How did you get involved
Yeah.
with NILC?
So good old in-person networking that was. So I met the boss at a network meeting, and kind of like they're a training company, and they didn't. I spotted they didn't do any social media courses, so I said, "What would you like to do some social media courses and get me to present them?" And he said, "No, not immediately, but we might." And then 6 months later, I got a call, and this was about 5 years ago. And since then, I've been running all their social media courses. So that's been a really useful, and managing their social media as I am. So that's been a really useful business connection, all from a single meeting at an in-person networking event. So yeah, of course, I could have my own YouTube channel, but it kind of like it's a good partnership because on the workshop side, I haven't got to worry about the we got this expression here like getting bums on seats, so I haven't got to worry about the ticketing and the money and the advertising and the publicity around it and the, the booking and the management of all of that and the stuff afterwards. All I got to do is literally either turn up or fire up Zoom, do the training,
Mm-hmm.
obviously save recordings, PowerPoints or whatever, send them off, end of story. Um, so that suits me because it just means I can focus on the training side. And with the video, similar kind of thing. So they've already got an established YouTube channel which they're looking to monetize. Um, they've got all the gear for the video stuff, and it almost like forces me to do it. I don't really like doing it, to be honest. So if I had to do it myself, I'd probably find something else to do. But I know it is a good thing to do, and people say I come across quite well, so I'm happy to do it. So yeah, so that's really how that's come about. And of course, me doing the videos, it will help get more bums on seats for the courses. So why not? So it serves me in that respect as well. So yeah.
Yeah. Um, and you share the load too with another colleague on there, so that it seems like it's not like all you, like you said. So that must be nice to have, yeah, the machine working kind of, and you can plug yourself in. um
Yeah, exactly. Yeah,
yeah.
that's a good way of putting it. Yeah, yeah.
uh you I was curious about your laptop, your Fridays. um
Oh yeah, yeah,
uh
yeah.
because I'm hoping to start something like that. Did you start that from scratch? Was that your thing, or?
Yeah, it was like it was interesting how it came about. So it was a long time ago. It was about 14 years ago now. And it kind of like came about at the same time. So there was two of us that were going to a lady called Belinda Wilson. Two of us were going to this coffee shop, and we actually almost had like two rival events. So, but both started informally, as in some people would join, would just I wasn't leading it. People would just like work. I was just in a small group of people that would work. She was in a small group of people that would work. She formalized it. She was the first one to formalize it, to be fair, and said, right, let's kind of make this a thing and we'll get people along on Wednesdays. And by chance, I was like happening to meet on Fridays. So I kind of like said, this is no good. Wednesday's no good. You want Friday because Friday is like, more people are likely to turn up on a Friday because
Hmm.
it's a Friday and the end of the week. So, and we also decided that, well, this is ridiculous having competing events, trying to like start something new with one on a Wednesday and one on a Friday. So we went for the Friday thing. So yeah, so it was a collaboration really, and I'm quite proud of that because it's now running in Cheltenham, two places in Devon, here in Cardiff. So that's like four places, and in Cheltenham it's run every Friday by Christmas and stuff like that, for 14 years, so every week. So that's pretty good. And yeah, they still get anything from sort of like 5 to 10 people attending, pretty low numbers, but it's a consistent thing. The other meetings have fairly similar numbers as well. Cardiff's still getting going, so 6 is probably the maximum we've had so far, but we haven't been going here too long. But it's a great thing. It's just like informal co-working. People are a bit some people get it straight away. Um, some people are a bit sort of mystified by it. Some people think it's all about laptops and IT support.
Hmm.
Um, some people think that laptops are compulsory, but like neither is true really. It's just a sort of pretty laid back co-working networking thing. So if somebody just wanted to sit down with us for a cup of coffee, they'd be and a chat, they'd be most like welcome. But we usually get a little bit of work done, but it depends on what. Yeah, it depends on what's happening. But certainly people have gone on to do projects and business and work together, which is great. And that's, that's like hard to measure, but that's like that's happened a lot. Yeah, so it's been a good thing.
It sounds like simplicity and patience, like just playing the long game.
Definitely, that's a good way of putting it. And a lot of people have said, "Oh, why don't you like charge for it and stuff?" But I just, again, that's the simplicity thing. If you keep the money out of it, you just haven't got that added
Hmm.
complication. And whilst there is kind of something in charging people for a ticket price because it means they're more likely to turn up, I don't think that really holds true for a weekly event, because they could just come along anytime. So if they really want to come, I think they'll come. And if you did tell somebody it's $5, £5 a week or whatever, that could certainly put some people off. So yeah, so no money. It's just a really good event. Yeah.
Yeah. Jonathan, how can we find you on the internet?
So do you know what? This might sound a bit arrogant, but if you just, because I've got an unusual name, if you just Google my name, that's probably the best way. I mean, my website's pollingersocial.co.uk for the social media, but finding my name, I've got like a link tree, and then you've got all these other things like Laptop Friday and all that other sort of stuff going on. So, um, yeah, lucky to be born with an unusual name, which pays when it comes to SEO and stuff. So,
Yeah.
yeah,
All right, Jonathan. Thank you for being gracious with your time. It's been a
welcome.
delightful conversation. And
Great to meet
we'll
you
have to have you
and
back on.
to chat. It's been fun.
Yeah. All right.
Fantastic. Thanks, Matt.
Yep.